right, is the graduating class of 2016 ready to start? Good. Just remember, I hate to cut off your conversation, but remember you have 3 years in order to make friends, maybe a few enemies along the way, so you'll have plenty of opportunity to renew these friendships. It's my pleasure today to welcome you to the Faculty of Law, and especially to first-year law. You are the inaugural class as we start the second century as a university faculty of law. This century will bring great change to the study, teaching, and practice of law. In that sense, you are beginning what may be seen as a new frontier, an exciting, if not unsettling, prospect. My name, strangely enough, in the minds of many of you, is John Law. I did not pick the name because I knew what I was going to be doing. My parents picked it. It's been a burden. But just think of it this way. As I get older, I'm more forgetful, and with this name, as long as I can remember it, I know approximately what I do and where I will be working. If, however, the law school decides to sell the name of the law school to some donor, I'm in a lot of trouble unless his name is Law also. I'm a professor in the faculty, and I currently serve as the Vice Dean, a position with a myriad and sometimes unexpected range of activities. Essentially, I'm responsible for the academic affairs of the faculty. But today I have a more important responsibility, and that is to be your Master of Ceremonies for our orientation program. As I prepared my remarks today, as I often do, I was thinking of my first day of law school, a time before most, if not all of you, were born. Before my class stood an imposing group of men, and I emphasize men. Professors, judges, and representatives from the legal profession. My class was largely made up of white males. About 10 or so members of my class were women out of 170 students. We were admonished that law was a rigorous program with high demanding standards. Indeed, as the traditional story goes, one speaker suggested we look to the left and we look to the right, one of us would not graduate. That did not seem necessarily to concern any of us, but we all felt sympathy for what would ultimately befall the person to either our right or our left. It's like the classic story when you're in the woods worried about bears, and all you have to remember is, can you run faster than the other person in the tent? However, today, times have changed. Instead of instilling a sense of fear into the first-year class, we, with the support of law firms, hanged out our form of swag bags. We take pictures for posterity to mark the event. We offer a welcoming barbecue featuring meat, chicken, and veggie burgers, salads, and other healthy things. I always thought veggie burgers were healthy, and that's why I avoided them. I was, however, told today that they actually contain more calories than the good old meat kind. So I feel somehow I've stumbled onto something right. Clearly, however, the times have changed for the better. As you will note from your orientation handout, we have a very full program ahead of us today, and I will ask for your cooperation, as timing will be tight, in returning to the room in a timely fashion after the breaks. Now let us turn to the program. My introductions will be brief, as you will find some biographical material on all of our participants in your handout. I don't know how many of you brought a pen. I'm beginning to think, or a pencil, I'm beginning to think that nobody uses pens or pencils anymore. But there are a couple of errors in the orientation program, which I want to correct, if for no other reason than to make my colleagues happy that these grievous errors have been corrected. So, if you turn to the heading Faculty Profiles, and it will be under Tamara Buchwald. Professor Buchwald is a professor, a full professor, not an assistant professor, but a full professor. Just in case you keep this for posterity. Peter Sankoff is not an associate professor, he is a full professor. And Darcy Vermette, who's almost at the last reference in faculty profiles, obtained not an LLB from Ottawa, but an LLD. In other words, he has his doctorate in laws, and I think that that ought to be appropriately recognized. This shows you that lawyers do have some skills in closely reading text. They may not read them as closely as they should firsthand, but sooner or later they get around to it, and as long as the mistakes are corrected, everything is all right. Okay, now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our Dean, Philip Bryden. Before joining us 4 years ago, he was the Dean of Law at the University of New Brunswick, and before that, a long-serving member of the Faculty of Law at the University of British Columbia. A Rhodes Scholar, Phil Bryden has studied law in the United Kingdom and the United States, where he also practiced for a while before commencing his academic career with a teaching and research focus in administrative law, constitutional law, human rights law, and labor law. I now turn you over to Dean Bryden.
Thank you very much, John, and welcome everyone to your first day of law school. This is a great law school with a great tradition. We began admitting law students in the fall of 1912, which means that this is our 101st year of operation. Unfortunately for you, this also means that most of the really exciting and interesting things that we planned during our centenary year were things that you didn't get an opportunity to take part in. But there is one exception that I wanted to mention, and that is our centenary conference on the future of law school that's going to be held this fall. The conference is going to be held next door in the Telecenter from the evening of Thursday, September 29th, or excuse me, September 26th, to Saturday, September 28th. And we're canceling classes on Friday, September 27th, so that classes from other faculties that would normally be held in the Telecenter can be held here in the Law Center, and also to give our students an opportunity to attend the conference. We have speakers coming from across Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia. And I encourage you to take a look at the conference program on our website. And I think that if you do, you'll agree with me that it's going to be an outstanding event. We have reserved some space for students to attend the conference, and if you're interested, please be alert for notices that will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. And if you're interested, I really encourage you to participate in one way or another in the conference. The other thing that I wanted to make by way of introductory remark was to mention something that, if those of you who have been paying attention to the news will know about, and that's the financial difficulties that the University of Alberta is facing right at the moment. This isn't unique to the University of Alberta. Within Alberta, or frankly, within Canada, there have been various times when universities have faced financial challenges. An institution that's more than 100 years old has faced these kinds of challenges in the past, and I dare say that we'll face them in the future. We're not immune to these challenges at the law school. What I can say is that we've got a plan for addressing the challenges, and we'll be able to meet our budget reduction targets, and that our goal is always to give our highest priority to maintaining the quality of the academic program that we make available to our students. I can't promise you that we will do everything over the next 3 years exactly the same way that we did them in the past. We're going to have to watch our money a little bit. It'll be tougher for us to replace retiring faculty. But I can say that we're going to get through this rough patch as we've gotten through difficult times in the past. And I can promise you that we have an extraordinarily talented and dedicated faculty and staff who are going to give you an outstanding educational experience. And I think that at the end of the 3 years, you'll be glad that you chose the University of Alberta, regardless of what what kinds of short-term financial difficulties we have to get through in the next couple of years. Now, I suspect that this is an exciting day for you, but it can be a bit overwhelming. Certainly in looking at the program, I was overwhelmed. So I'm going to try to keep my remarks brief and concentrate just on two messages. The first message is that academic success at law school is almost certain to come harder for many of you than academic success in undergraduate programs, but that you're all capable of succeeding in our program. And I think it's important that you begin your legal studies confident in the knowledge that you're able to succeed at law school. As John mentioned, there was a time when deans used to try to frighten students about failure in first year. That's just no longer the case. It may not have been the case even when John was attending law school, but it isn't true now. We admit you confident in the knowledge that you can be successful, and we know that you can be successful because we picked you, 178 of you, from over 1,425 applicants. So it's really hard to get into law school, and the most difficult part of achieving success in law school is the part that you've already achieved, which is getting in. So I know that you can be successful in the program, but that doesn't mean that you're going to have the same level of success that you had as undergraduate students. Our average undergraduate GPA for this year's incoming class was 3.8, which is pretty close to an A average in your undergraduate programs. Obviously, not all of you had A averages, but all of you were pretty close to that. And so we know that you had a lot of success in the past, but law school's a little bit different. One thing that's different or distinctive about law school is that you have to learn to think about issues the way lawyers do. And I know that all of you will, by the end of the 3 years, be able to do that, but it'll come more quickly to some of you than to others. Be patient, stick with it, and you'll get there. But it is a little bit of a challenge. The other thing is that you're facing stiffer competition here than in any other institution that you took part in your undergraduate and maybe even some of your graduate degree programs. Contrary to popular belief, we don't grade on a bell curve here. But our grading policies do require that the average grade in your first year courses be around a B minus or B to B minus GPA. And that means that some of you are going to be getting grades that you're not used to. In fact, most of you are used to getting A's, or maybe a B plus is kind of a bad mark. And now the average mark is going to be somewhere between a B minus and a B. So this can be a bit frustrating, and it can cause you a lot of anxiety. But that's just the way it is, and it's important to get over that and try to focus not on the grade, but on what it is that you're learning. Now, obviously, there are things you can do to improve your chances of academic success. You can keep up with your readings and your assignments. You can go to class. You can take part actively in the class discussions. But at the end of the day, there is going to be a grade distribution that's different than what you're used to. What I think is important is that we try to make the learning environment and the learning experience as positive as it can be. We probably can't make it free of stress, And there will undoubtedly be some stress in getting marks that are lower than you're used to, at least for most of you. But we can make it a supportive environment. And I think, on the whole, we're pretty good at doing that, but it is something that we have to continually work at. And I encourage you to try to be patient with your faculty members and particularly with your fellow students, and to try to be supportive and encouraging when things don't go as well as they might be. In particular, it's really important to recognize that some of you may experience more serious challenges than others, whether it's as a result of health problems or family or other kinds of personal problems. And it's important for you to know that there's help there for you. In fact, the one thing I would encourage you to take from my remarks is that it's important not to suffer in silence. There was a time when people in the legal profession thought that the best thing to do was the stiff upper lip approach and not admitting that you've had a problem. And I think that by and large that view is discredited, even in the profession, although there may still be some pockets of it in the profession, but certainly in the academy, we take the view that it's really important to get help when you're having a problem. And we try to be as supportive as we can. This afternoon, John Lawn and Shannon Gullberg will be telling you about the academic support resources that we have and the personal support resources that we have. And I'd encourage you to pay particular attention to that part of the program and use those resources if and when the need arises. The second thing that I wanted to talk about was your law school experience and what it is beyond learning about the law that's important in law school. And I think that the most important thing that you can learn in law school, beyond the sort of legal rules and skills of being a lawyer, is about yourself and how the unique set of talents and abilities and interests that you bring to the table can help you build a successful career in law. It's always nice to get great grades, and there's no question that better grades typically open up career opportunities for those who get them that aren't available for students who don't get grades that are quite as good. Even though not all of you are going to be A students, however, in my view, all of you can have the prospect of outstanding careers in the law. And that's because the law requires many different types of skills. And in my experience, there are very few people who have the same level of skill and aptitude in all areas of legal practice, and the same skills across the range of things that lawyers do. For example, some of you may turn out to be really good at cross-examining witnesses and making oral arguments, but you may not be so good at doing things that other people are good at, like helping people resolve conflict through mediation. Some of you may turn out to be really good at solving complicated tax problems, but you may not be as good as helping people through the personal as well as legal challenges that are associated with family breakdown and divorce. And our profession needs people who have all of those kinds of skills, people who can advocate with passion and skill, and people who can help solve problems, people who can deal with the complex challenges that organizations face in an international economy, and people who can help individuals deal with their personal crises. And Not all of you will be able to do all of it, but I'm sure that all of you will be able to find a place where your unique talents will enable you to thrive. Now, the good news for you is that the legal profession is extremely diversified, and so that it is possible for you to find your niche in a very diversified profession. The bad news is that for some of you that will be more challenging than for others. There was a time when most people who graduated from law school went on to article with a firm, and they stayed with that firm for the rest of their legal careers. And I think that is more and more the exception now rather than the rule. People move around. People sometimes have trouble finding the right place for them, and sometimes they're in the right place, and the environment moves away, and they've got to be prepared to adapt. So think of what you're learning about yourself and your particular skills and abilities in the law as part of a process of lifelong learning, rather than something that you do for 3 years and then you go on and get into the real world and stop learning and start doing. In fact, it's a constant process of learning. But I'm confident that there are excellent opportunities out there if you can find what your particular passion and talent is, and a way to align yourself with either a set of clients or an organization that serves clients that give you the opportunities to take advantage of those skills. Obviously, there's a long time between the first day of law school and the point at which you're making these kinds of career choices. And I wanted to raise this with you simply in order to give you a bit of perspective on your successes and your disappointments in law school. Obviously, it's really nice to get good grades and have success in law school, but it's always useful to remember that 30 years from now, your clients are not going to be interested in how well you did on your corporation's exam in second year, but on what you can do to help them with their problems. And so that's something that you want to keep in front of you, both to temper the elation at the successes and the disappointment at the failures. I look forward to meeting you over the course of the coming academic year, and particularly throughout the orientation period. And I also wanted to mention that I'm going to be teaching about a third of you in the Foundations to Law course, and I'm really looking forward to teaching that course again this year, and we'll meet each other for the first time on Thursday afternoon. So have a great orientation. I know you're going to have a fabulous first year in law school, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Dean Bryden. Our next speaker is the president of the Law Society of Alberta, Mr. Karsten Jensen, QC, which I'm sure most of you know stands for Queen's Counsel, a recognition of some achievement and distinction in the profession. Mr. Jensen's CV or biography is set out in your material. He is a partner at a firm called Jensen, Shawa, Solomon, Duguid, and Hawks. He is one of the founding partners of JSS Barristers. I assume that's a short form for that firm. And has had quite an interesting career, including work internationally with the United Nations Compensation Commission in Geneva. His area of practice is primarily civil litigation, and he is recognized as a leading lawyer in the field of corporate commercial litigation a very demanding kind of practice. The role of president of the Law Society is not one easily undertaken, as in essence it is a full plus time job, but it is part of our tradition of self-governance and regulation, which marks the legal profession from many other occupations and callings. So I'm delighted that he was able to take time in his schedule to say a few words, spend some time with us today. Mr. Carson Jensen.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a great privilege for me to be here to speak at the law school orientation. I'm here as the president of the Law Society today, but more about that in a few moments. First, coming here today reminds me of my own experience at this law school when I started here in this building, in this room, 26 years ago. I lived right across the street, actually, and I see that's a construction site now, so I'm interested to see what they're building there. But it was, I had a terrific experience at this law school. I made friends here in my first week who are like family to me now, two of whom are my partners in my law practice in Calgary, people I just got to know so well, literally starting in my first week of law school, and people I still practice with and I see in my law firm every day. You too will have the opportunity to make lifelong friends here and to have those kinds of experiences and to obtain a great legal education. That education will sustain you throughout your career. I only have one piece of advice for you today, and that is to grab the opportunity that you have and make the most of it. It really is a remarkable opportunity that this school will give you over the coming 3 years. You are embarking on a legal career at a time of enormous change, and the Dean alluded to that in his comments. You've probably all been told that all your lives, that the pace of change is accelerating through society. It's true. We're seeing it in the legal profession as well. I'll give you a couple of examples. When I first started practice, some of the senior partners of the firm I worked with in Calgary were very fussed about the concept of faxes. They were very distressed by the fact that the profession was being destroyed by this near instantaneous form of communication where people would expect responses in the next day or two after sending a letter. They thought that it was potentially the ruin of the profession because it was taking away the opportunity for reflective thought. Now, technology has only just started to reshape our profession. The profession remains somewhat conservative in its embrace of technology, but we cannot hold back the tide, nor should we. Technology is a great leveler. It'll provide better opportunity for all of us as lawyers, as citizens, and for our clients, but it is hugely disruptive. We see throughout the legal system problems with access to justice issues where people simply can't find counsel to assist them with their legal problems. We have courts that are clogged with self-represented litigants, some of which can't find counsel, some of whom are people who simply choose to represent themselves. We are in the age of Google, where everyone can go on WebMD and diagnose their own medical problems. I certainly do that from time to time without too much success, probably. People do the same thing with their legal problems. They have legal problems, they try to figure out the answers themselves, and they try to solve many of these problems themselves. The legal system is really burdened by the pressure of this, the court system in particular, the pressure of this, self-represented litigants, people who can't get or don't want counsel to assist them. At the same time, there are whole areas of practice that we've abandoned as lawyers. And that is that's a threat to our clients and their best interests. It's a threat to our ability to regulate the profession as a law society in the sense that we effectively operate a monopoly. And in order to operate a monopoly, we have to serve. There are certain responsibilities that come with that, including serving people's legal needs. Yet there are areas of practice that we've abandoned. Consumer issues, if for most consumers who have a consumer law problem, they're not going to be able to find a lawyer practicing who can assist them with that. One example that I sometimes give to people is tax assessment appeals, or you get a tax assessment on your house and you don't agree with it and you want to go and appeal it. There's a whole court system or parallel kind of court system that deals with that. If you go down there, they operate what looks like courtrooms with decision makers and people making arguments on behalf of homeowners. There isn't a lawyer anywhere in sight. In that whole operation, nobody is practicing law. At least they say they're not practicing law, yet they're providing what, to me, looks like a legal service to a member of the public. And we've abandoned those areas of practice, which creates a challenge to us as an independently regulated profession. It also creates a challenge to members of the public who are dealing with people who are unregulated and uninsured. At the same time, we have challenges to the independent regulation of the legal profession throughout the world. Canada is now a bastion, or one of the last places in the world where the legal profession is self-regulated or independently regulated. In many other jurisdictions, that's simply not so. In the United Kingdom, in England and Wales, they've abandoned self-regulation. They called it chaps regulating chaps. They didn't like that concept very much, and they put in a quasi-governmental kind of agency to regulate lawyers. Australia, most of the states in Australia have followed suit. This is a significant challenge to us as an independent regulator of the legal profession. You heard John Law mention self-regulation and the importance of self-regulation. I agree with him, but I tend to refer to it as independent regulation, because self-regulation sends a funny kind of message that we're doing things in our own interests rather than in the public interest. And the reality is that being an independently regulated profession as we are is a privilege and something we have to fight for. It has a real value in our society. Nobody wants a lawyer when they're facing a criminal prosecutor. Nobody wants a lawyer who's regulated by the state. You want an independent lawyer who will fight the state. You don't want a lawyer who works for the state to defend you. Independent regulation of the profession is important, and it's something that we have to fight for. Technology is going to continue to change the profession in changing some of the models for delivery of legal services. We're seeing already legal services delivered through new technological platforms. We're seeing lawyers around the world delivering legal services here in Alberta. That's new. We recently permitted a lawyer who was an Alberta lawyer but who lives in the United Kingdom to provide legal services here in Alberta from the UK entirely through a technological platform that he had put together where he could service his clients' needs in his niche area of practice. He's licensed in Alberta. The only issue was that he's physically remote from the province. Is that a problem for us? At the end of the day, we concluded it was not, and we arranged to extend insurance to that lawyer. I make that point simply because that's the beginning of a much bigger trend. In the future, unless you're in a very specialized area of practice that requires your physical presence here in Alberta, legal services can be delivered from anywhere. Really, it's a knowledge product, and like most knowledge products, it can be delivered remotely, and you are going to see more and more of that as in your practices as you enter our profession. We're going to see collaboration between lawyers and other professionals in a way that is now quite uncommon. Change is stressful and difficult, and you are entering a rapidly changing profession. What you will learn here, as the Dean indicated, is a way of thinking about problems. You will learn how to think like a lawyer. You will be given a set of tools, and those tools will be useful for a time. But the tools will change over time, and what will really stand the test of time is the way you think about problems as a result of your legal education. You will learn to think like a lawyer. Now back to the Law Society just for a moment. As I mentioned earlier, the Law Society is the independent regulator of the legal profession in Alberta. We are mostly run by lawyers, but not completely. We have some public members who serve as benchers or directors of the Law Society. We're responsible for things like admission. So at the end of the day, when you come out of here, You have to complete an articling process, which is prescribed by the Law Society. And once that's finished, you'll apply for admission to the Law Society. And assuming you've completed all the required steps, we will admit you as a member of the Law Society, and you'll have all the privileges of a member of the Law Society from that point forward. At that point, you're subject to our regulation, which means we will work hard to ensure your continuing competence throughout your profession, your professional life. And if problems arise, we will deal with them through our discipline process. Now, more and more, we have an emphasis on remediation when problems do arise. There was a time when a letter from the Law Society was a frightening thing for most lawyers to receive. We hope it's not so anymore. Much as with the law school, when problems arise, we have lots of ways of helping people. And when you do leave here and join the profession as fully licensed lawyers, there will be lots of opportunities for assistance, some of which are provided by the Law Society throughout your professional lives. Before I leave the podium, I wanted to talk for a moment about a few issues that are on our agenda, things that I think will affect you all very much as students. The first is national mobility. We are very near the completion of our national mobility project. National mobility has two facets once you're a licensed lawyer in Canada. The first facet is that you can move temporarily to take on a retainer in another jurisdiction. So that means you're practicing here in Edmonton and you're offered a case in Saskatchewan. You're not actually going to physically move to Saskatchewan, but you think you can do that case. You want to do that case. Your client wants you to do that case. You have temporary mobility that permits you to take on that case. That's the first facet of mobility. The second is permanent mobility, which means, for example, you're living here in Edmonton or in Calgary, and for family or other reasons you decide you want to move to Vancouver or Toronto. You have permanent mobility. That means you will be able to transfer from your licensed jurisdiction to a new jurisdiction that will take over the regulatory responsibility for you. Now, that project is complete among the common law provinces and has been for a few years, and we've just concluded mobility arrangements with the province of Quebec, which will provide the same ability for lawyers across the country. So that'll come into place this fall. So national mobility, you're entering a landscape that was very controversial when it first started. We first started talking about it, but the landscape you're entering, that is a project that's very much near completion. So it really doesn't matter at this point where you go to law school, where your article, you have the whole country in which you can practice. The next is national admission standards. A corollary to mobility is we've got to make sure everybody who's coming into the profession has some kind of comparable qualifications. And so we're working very hard on national admission standards, and more to come with respect to that. And one issue which you've probably heard of, which is very much on our agenda at the moment, is an issue with respect to Trinity Western University in the Lower Mainland in British Columbia. Trinity Western is a private religious school, and they're proposing to open a law school, and they've sought regulatory approval for that law school from the Federation of Law Societies, which is our coordinating body. And ultimately, we're going to have to make a decision about that school, too. The difficulty that we have, of course, is that they have a community covenant as a private school, private religious school, that would effectively operate to bar gay and lesbian students from attending that university. So we have a clash of charter rights, things that you're going to hear a lot about in your studies, particularly in constitutional law, where we have those who would argue religious freedom on the one hand, and those who would argue equality on the other. And so I don't know what the answer is. I can tell you it's an issue that we're wrestling with and is on our agenda for this fall. In conclusion, I'm very proud to be a graduate of this fine school. I look forward to welcoming all of you into the profession in a few years' time, and I wish you all the best with your studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Karsten, for your very thoughtful and informative remarks. You'll pardon me, but I do find it ironic for a lawyer who's expresses his area of expertise involving medical negligence, doing self-diagnosis via the internet, but maybe there are doctors out there doing their own legal work, which is an equally frightening concept. Now I turn to our keynote speaker for today, another distinguished alumni of this faculty, Madam Justice Beilby of the Alberta Court of Appeal. Madam Justice Beilby graduated from this faculty, oldest to say, after I did. She graduated with greater distinction than I did, with the gold medal in 1974. She's been a judge of the Alberta Court of Appeal and the Court of Queen's Bench since 1990, and before that was in private practice with, I believe, it was then known as Field & Field, and now it's known as Field Law, LLP. And so I turn you to Madam Justice Myra Beilby. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm going to ask you to indulge me by listening to a few anecdotes, and some of those repeat some of the themes that we've already heard touched on by prior speakers here today. I graduated from the law school here 39 years ago, as you've just heard, a member of the first class to start school in this building. And so 42 years ago today, I sat on the floor in this building because, in this room, because the chairs weren't installed yet, and heard the same lecture more or less as you're going to be hearing from me, or the comments, but delivered by an older man, except I think he was probably 15 years younger than I am, but he sure looked old at the time, and talking about some of the same themes, though, I expect. Well, the school's changed a lot in the last 100 years, and you've heard that this is the 101st year of the law school here, the oldest law school in Western Canada. There are some constants that have continued on pretty much through the last 10 decades. This law school is one of the very few where a near majority of the courses are taught by legal practitioners, people who actually go out there and do it every day, who make a living doing it, and they will be able to give you practical insight and procedural instruction that I suggest is of a quality somewhat different than the regular faculty, and something that you won't be able to get other places. It's perfect if you plan to practice in Alberta now, notwithstanding mobility abilities that we've heard about here now, and I wonder still if you have to take land titles if you want to, move to another province or what have you. But the reality is most of you are here because you plan to practice, you plan to work in Alberta, and that's because you live here, because the economy is vibrant here, because most of the lawyers who we graduate get jobs practicing law, and that's a good thing. Alberta is a great place to work, a great place to live. It's a great place to study law if you plan to work here, and so good choice. I know every one of you had the LSAT marks to go somewhere else if you'd wanted to, and so it's a good thing that you came here today, and I commend you for it. Now, the topic I've been asked to address specifically is access to justice over the next century. Now, if I knew what was going to happen over that period, or even over the next decade, I'd be rich. But I can blue sky a bit about what I think is going to happen over the years that you're in law school, articling, and starting your career, whether it's working as counsel for a law firm, a traditional law firm, working for the government, working as a prosecutor, working in-house for a corporation, working for a not-for-profit, working overseas. What are the access to justice issues here? Why are there areas of practice that lawyers have abandoned? Why are there people with problems that they can't get legal help to solve? Well, you look around and you say, gee, there's 185 of you, I guess, here today, and there are, 15 or 16 law schools in Canada, not counting the one that might or might not fly in BC that we just heard about, and every one of them probably have a similar number, including the civil law schools in Quebec. So how can there be people who can't get a lawyer? How can there be legal problems that go unsolved? Two major issues exist today, and the first of those is cost. The cost of hiring legal assistants is high and disproportionate to some of the issues. So if you're a landlord, if you have a basement suite and the person downstairs isn't paying the rent or partying too loud and won't move out, what do? If you're a single mom who's working a minimum wage job and your husband gets a job, and the ex-husband gets a job in the oil patch, and you know you're entitled to more child support, how do you get it? If you have a small business and you see somebody's stolen your name and now has the #1 internet listing, so when you look on the internet for trash removal, you get their business rather than yours. This is my trash guy told me this happened to him. What does he do about it? Because it's not, they don't have the money for a lawyer. You can't get legal aid. Legal aid is almost exclusively available only for major criminal matters. That is where the accused is at risk of going to jail. And only for those people who have an income level about the same as a minimum wage worker or lower. So if you earn more than $1,348 a month gross in Alberta, you won't get legal aid even if you're charged with murder. If you have a civil problem or earn more than the minimum wage on anything else, you're not likely to qualify for legal aid at all. And when you qualify it, you have to pay it back over time, without interest, albeit. But I'm told that about 75% of legal aid in Alberta is actually paid back. So it's not a ticket to ride, it's just a way of financing, getting legal help, even for those relatively few cases that qualify. So this means that more than 30% of people who want child support, who are left with none of the assets and all of the obligations when a family splits up, and almost 100% of those charged with criminal matters that are not likely to put them in jail, will never get a lawyer to help them, will not have access to a lawyer. It costs more than $50,000 in legal fees to take a contested divorce through trial, and if custody is an issue, you can easily double that with experts' fees. So that's, in my mind, one of the major access to justice issues at the moment. The second, also critical in a province where so many of our population have come from other places, including some of you here today, a lot of people don't know where to turn when they have a legal problem or may have difficulty accessing an experienced lawyer even if they can afford to pay. What happens if you don't speak English? What happens if you just moved here to Canada, to Alberta, to Edmonton? What happens if you come from a family with no experience with the law? What happens if you have limited education or limited comprehension yourself? You have a legal problem, but you don't know what to do. Alberta is a home to many recent immigrants. Rural Alberta is very seriously underserved. Most of you will not graduate and go to work in rural Alberta, even though there are wonderful practices and good incomes available for you there. Over 30% of families, over 30% of you, probably 50% of lawyers' families will be subject to a family court order at some stage, and yet family law is an unfashionable area of practice at the moment. So those are our current access to justice issues, the main ones that I see. So what are the ones that are going to develop? How's this going to play out by the time you're out there and people are paying you $150 an hour to solve their problem? Eight of these I was able to identify. One, more of the same. Currently, of the 7,742 lawyers practicing in Alberta, 6,636 work in Edmonton or Calgary. The problem is expected to worsen as the average age of rural practitioners is higher than in the city, with many close to retirement. Many have been unable to formulate succession plans for their practice because of the difficulty of getting junior lawyers to article and practice in smaller communities. Now, most rural practitioners have general practices focused on the legal needs of individuals and small businesses: wills, real estate, criminal defense, family matters, incorporation. There's a terrific opportunity for you out there in rural Alberta, and I'm including Red Deer and Fort McMurray and rural, right? Not very small places. Consider going outside the city, even to places like Barrhead, an hour drive from Edmonton. The richest judge I know made his money starting up in Fort McMurray in the early days. He owns most of it now. If you go there or anywhere within your career, within a very short number of years, you'll be school board chair, town councillor, mayor. You'll go to work in under 10 minutes, and you'll be a hero to your neighbors. No one else will be able to say that in the legal profession. So keep it in mind when the time comes. There's a subset of that called going to the Arctic, but I won't tell you that, but that's another passion that I have because I'm a deputy judge in the north, and it's an exhilarating place to be. Second, access to justice issue during your immediate future, more of the same, subset, family law. Alberta has more divorces per capita than any other province because it has a younger population than any other province. The divorce rate, perhaps not too surprisingly, follows the age of the population and the rate of marriage. There were 8,000 divorces in Alberta last year alone, but on the flip side, we have the highest marriage rate of any province as well for the same reason. So if you want to defend a divorce, if somebody wants to divorce you and have some property, split something, get some money, you may have to wait up to 4 months. You will have to wait up to 4 months to get an appointment to see an experienced family law lawyer. There's a huge demand for family law practitioners, and this is going to continue as the province grows. So why should you take family law? You say, icky. Why do I want to get involved in other people's problems? Well, frankly, you signed up for it because that's what law is all about, right? You're here to help people prevent problems or to help them solve them with minimal cost and minimal fallout when those problems arise. So even if you don't see yourself in family court, and even if you think you're going to really be involved in petroleum law and overseas finance, you should take family law. Take family law. Why? I review. 35% of you will be subject to a family court order at some time in your life. So it's a good idea to get a bit of an idea of how to reduce that risk. Second, most of you aren't going to start your practice in the Supreme Court of Canada. Hope that's not too disappointing. Most law students will end up doing the family law in the firm because that's the job that's available to you. Might as well learn how to do it and to enjoy the rewards that it brings. Third, family law makes a nice little boutique practice for those who want to take 100% control over their work lives. For those who want to change the world, there's no area of practice which better allows you to do so effectively and immediately, albeit on a case-by-case basis, than family law. You are helping people during the worst day of their life. And you don't have to do it all of the time. In fact, it'd make you crazy if you did it all the time. You can mix it up with wills, real estate, probate, motor vehicle work, or whatever. Third, technological change. Online information will make legal information more accessible to self-reps, with all of the risk and problems attendant on being your own lawyer. I've been on the Court of Appeal about 3.5 years, but I'm in charge of recruiting and training our articling students, so I'll prepare yourself for a commercial in a minute. But anyway, this year for the first time I helped on the segment of training on family law and probate with one of my colleagues on Queen's Bench. And I noticed I haven't done any direct, first-line divorces. I've granted 4,400 divorces in my day, but none for the last 3.5 years, and I haven't granted any probate during that period of time either since I've been on the Court of Appeal. And just within that time period, I was stunned by the increase in the number of self-reps. Like, there were easily 40% of the files that I saw. We did 280 divorces this week in Edmonton, and I'd say 40% of those at least had one side that was representing themselves. People are going to go online, people are going to try to figure it out because they can't afford a lawyer, or they think they can't afford a lawyer, or it just seems the way to go. Also, there are technological changes which are in the process of changing how the profession of law works. We heard about people from the UK or offshore practicing in Alberta, and we can now accommodate court appearances from anywhere on the globe by video, and it works pretty well, although I'm not the one getting up in the middle of the night if the witness is somewhere far away. And also, we're looking very close at the day where all documents can be filed electronically and the paper will go away. However, 48% of Canadians lack the literacy skills to use online legal information, according to a report made public last month by the Access to Justice Committee of the CBA. I don't know how they figured that out, but I'm not surprised to hear it. And those with literary skills, the literacy skills rather, to read the internet may lack the analytical skills to actually apply what they're reading to their own personal circumstance, even if you assume they have iron emotional control, which nobody does when they're looking at the situation involving their own legal problems. An American study showed that most self-represented parties have at least 1 year of post-secondary education, and those with less than that simply can't navigate entry to the system at all. In Alberta, we just increased our limits in small claims court to $50,000. That might sound like a lot of money on a student budget, but the reality is that still leaves a whole area of litigation, I'd say the $50,000 to $150,000 range, where it's not economically worth a lawyer's time to litigate that because of the cost of the lawsuit. So those claims are either abandoned, or people abandon everything over the $50,000, or they'll settle it on a practical basis rather than a rights-based basis because they can't afford to litigate it. if you figure out how to tap into that unserviced demand, you will be rich. You might not want to be rich, but I'll tell you, who said it's, I've been rich and I've been poor and rich is better? I expect that's true, okay? And so you want to be secure in your life. You've come here, you've put a lot of work into your education so far. You want to have a good practice. We do JDRs, which you'll hear about eventually, which is an alternative form of dispute resolution as opposed to trials. The judges do them in Alberta, and they're very popular. They help cut the cost of litigation dramatically. I had one of these a few years ago when I was still a trial judge. The only Spanish-speaking lawyer in town at that time had been injured in a car accident. And that gave me an opportunity in the JDR to see the financial statements for her practice. She was a sole practitioner. Frankly, I have to confess that at the time, prior to that, I hadn't thought that much of her practice. I thought, oh, here's just a small practitioner, out there in the community. She earned more money than any lawyer I had met prior to that point in my career, and I was at least 15 years out as a judge at that point. And how did she do it? Because I review. She was the only Spanish-speaking lawyer in Edmonton. And there was a small Spanish-speaking population at that time. It's grown considerably with the foreign worker program in the last few years. But this lawyer serviced that community by doing everything that needed paperwork. She just didn't sue. She didn't do wills. People came to her. They didn't speak English. They were scared, often very recent in Canada. She got their gas hooked back up if it was cut off because they didn't pay. She did the most humble things as well as the biggest things. She didn't charge for a lot of the little stuff. So when the big stuff happened, they came to her. She said she went to every wedding, every christening, every cultural event, and of course her claim was, I can't do this anymore because I have a whiplash. So that certainly made me think in a different way about people who are serving a specific area of the community. And so I think this particular issue of the growth in self-reps may lead to an increased growth in not-for-profit organizations with which you might consider a job in the future. In Calgary, Legal Guidance and Student Legal Services, while they don't give jobs for lawyers other than volunteer jobs, are examples of how there are volunteer agencies who help people with certain kinds of legal problems. Fourth change, a continued or increased overrepresentation of Natives in the criminal justice system. Native families have an average of 8 children in Alberta compared to the 1.5 or 1.7 children other Canadian families have, and a vastly disproportionate number of those children sadly live in poverty. Anyone working downtown can attest to the fact that a significant number of street people and those living in the River Valley appear to be Native. When I visited the Young Offenders Center 2 weeks ago, the warden told me that virtually all of the children incarcerated there were Native. Native adults represent less than 4% of the total population in our province, yet range upward of 40% of those incarcerated. There is nothing which indicates to me that this situation is going to ameliorate anytime soon. Native lawyers and those interested in serving Native populations have nothing but opportunity here, either as practitioners or working in-house or for government agencies serving the First Nations community. Fifth trend that's going to challenge access to justice, just plain growth. Maybe a happy problem. Nova Scotia wishes they had this problem. But the reality is Alberta's population is now tipping the $4 million mark, and it's 4 million people mark, wish it was dollars, and projected to reach 5 million by 2020, just when you're getting going really in your practice. There were 144 babies born every day in Alberta last year. At the same time, we welcomed 200,000 new Albertans, 36,000 of whom were immigrants from 200 different countries. This increases demand for legal services generally, and specifically in relation to immigrants who often have relatively low income. If you are sitting here today on your first day of law school and you are fluent in Mandarin, you have a ticket to ride. Not only Spanish-speaking community is growing, but of course the Asian languages are the second largest growth group in Alberta and in Western Canada, probably in all of Canada generally. Second most common language in Alberta after English. And it now, I'm not just talking about working here in Alberta, but there's terrific offshore opportunities if you can work in the Orient as well as working here in Canada. Similarly, Edmonton now hosts 5 Spanish immersion elementary schools, and the demand is growing due to the foreign worker policy, which has tapped into largely Mexican workers who can now bring their families to Alberta when they come to work. These communities are underserved in their own language, and there's huge opportunity for you there. 6th, growth in alternative dispute resolution as an option to court. You don't have to come and see me and my buddies if you have a problem. You can hire an arbitrator, a mediator, and you can try to work it out on your own. It's faster, but it isn't cheaper because you have to pay the person who makes the decision in addition to the lawyer who's looking after you during the process. But it can produce a result that's very satisfactory depending on what your problem is. You forego truth for expediency to a degree. You don't have all of the opportunity to look at all of the documentation and the information on the other side to try to define what really happened at critical times. But you can do a risk assessment on what you're likely to get at the end of the day after you've paid your costs. And that's often enough for people to be very attracted to alternate dispute resolution. And as I said earlier, judges offer it. 85% of civil actions are now settled through alternate dispute resolution. We hardly ever get a civil trial anymore. Too bad. But you can also hire lawyers or go out to private mediators as well. 7th change that's going to carry on is the fact that Alberta has a cyclical, resource-based economy. Did that when I was a very young child and my family came here because my dad got a job in the oil industry, and it's continuing today. Alberta's wealth continues to depend on primary resources and commodities in spite of growth in many new enterprises and the decade-old emphasis on economic diversification in the province. That means that Alberta has a boom and bust economy, very closely tied to the world price of oil and gas. I've lived through 4 busts as an adult and 2 as a kid. Fortunately, the busts are of a lot shorter duration than the boom times, and I made way more money during the bust periods with my insolvency practice than I ever made during good times. But the message is be flexible. You're going to see a lot of ups and downs if you stay practicing here. You have to pick up new areas of practice when old areas disappear. Lots of lawyers have done what I did, and they were doing IPOs and issuing shares for brand new companies prior to 2008, and then 2008 happens, bang, they're doing financial restructuring for those businesses that have now become insolvent. 8, the growth in demand for legal services relating to the environmental aspects of commodity production. If the Keystone Pipeline is approved, it will come with increasing demands on producers to focus on reducing water and air pollution caused by the oil sands. And the same with the proposed pipeline through BC to Prince George. Public opinion in the U.S. will allow no other outcome. Alberta is the steward of a $15 trillion resource the size of the state of Florida. We have the most oil of anywhere in the world, and it will ultimately be produced. Many of you will have come up through your undergrad in an environment of concern for the environment in a wider scale. And what I'm really talking about here is maybe going to work for the bad guys. But I suggest you'll do a lot more good in the big picture if you work for oil companies and make their product socially acceptable by reducing the harm to the environment that it creates. And I think that this is something that's going to take off and run because Canada needs the pipelines, and the forces against the pipelines are strong enough to compel a result. So I said a moment ago that I'm going to give you a commercial, and here it is. I'm in charge of recruiting students to article with the Court of Appeal for your articling year. Now, that's 3 years away. That seems a long time to you, but it goes fast. And we'll be interviewing for those positions next year at this time, in the fall of your 2nd year. We're looking for those with good analytical and writing skills. And if you think we would appeal to you, please apply. It's a resume builder to have articled with the courts, Court of Appeal, Queen's Bench, Provincial Court. And most of our students find no difficulty in getting the 5-month remainder of their article with a major Alberta law firm. So if you come with us, you do 10 months with us and 5 months with a law firm or the government, as opposed to 12 months in a regular articling year. But we're a great employer, and it's a serene environment, I promise. And another job that you can think about that maybe many of you haven't is that of being a research lawyer. We hire, all the courts have research lawyers that work for them in many of the major law firms and government departments. And for those with an academic interest who wish to maintain a good work-life balance, you should consider becoming a research lawyer. So let's look at your next 3 years. What's going to happen? Well, as some of the others have said here today, everyone in this room is capable of passing every law school course, getting out of here, articling, and becoming a lawyer. Just passing the LSAT tells me that. That's a tough exam. The people who didn't get the marks that brought you into this room today might have challenges, but the cutoff's high enough that I know that you won't. Now, some of you will fall by the wayside because of personal issues or limited commitment, but that's your choice. It's not the choice of an independent decision maker or because you have to get poor marks because somebody's got to fall off the end. It doesn't work that way. You can do this. Parents with kids, possible? Is it possible? There were 12 women in my class, all practiced till retirement. Now, there's only 2 of us still working. That makes me question some of my own personal choices in life, but be that as it may. They all practiced a full career. At least 2 of those women had young kids while they were in law school. We still get together every other Monday night for Stitch and Bitch. I followed their lives all the way through, and they followed mine. Look around. You will find friends for life in this room today, and that's one of the great joys of law school. Work cooperatively. Make a friend. Don't fall behind. Ask questions. Be a team player. You'll be okay. I'd never met a lawyer when I went to law school. I finished with a gold medal. I practiced litigation with and was the first woman partner in the same firm for 16 years. I was the second woman ever elected a bencher of the Law Society of Alberta. That's Karsten's gig here. I came in second, and there were 15 or 16 spots, so I came in second, so yay. I was appointed to the trial court at age 39. I served there for 19 years before being elevated to the Court of Appeal, and all of this is punctuated by volunteer work, kids, and personal interests. Every one of those days, and this just isn't a story. And I know it's not just a case of somebody looking back and saying, these were the best days of my life going to law school. I liked law school, actually, because, hey, it worked for me, so I did. But, every day since then, I've been glad to be a lawyer, to have had an impact, to solve problems, and to understand why things happen. Your story can be the same or better over the next 39 years, and I'll be following your journeys with interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Justice Bilby. Okay, we now get a bit of a break. It has been our tradition to take a photo of the class when you start, just so you can compare what you look like when you finish, and you get a more expensive photograph. So I would ask you to go downstairs, be outside as normal. Yes, it'll be outside, front doors. Take the photograph. Please be back promptly. We have a really busy agenda, and I wouldn't want to run too far behind. Shortening remarks, that's always a good thing. It now remains for me to say a few words about the so-called academic experience. A great deal can be said about law school and the standard program of legal education. A great deal has been said about law school and the standard program of legal education. You shall be delighted to know that I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say very much about it, except to engage you in some rather broad themes, some of which have already been alluded to today. In Canada and the United States, university legal education is largely standardized. It is, at this point in time, probably a 130-year-old phenomenon. It is a 3-year program of university study following a graduate or undergraduate degree program. The first year that you're about to embark upon is foundational. It consists of an introduction to legal writing and research, instruction in the case study method, and the study of core, substantive, and procedural public and private law subjects, such as criminal law, constitutional law, property law, etc. This is essentially our first-year program. Similar mandatory first-year programs with some variation can be found at all Canadian common law schools across the country, and indeed with the Federation of Law Societies' so-called national mobility, national admissions projects, the standardization of the content of the Canadian common law degree has become more pronounced with their requirement that certain competencies or courses must be addressed. The remaining 2 years of the program, what we call the upper year, consist of a mix of optional and, in our case, mandatory courses directed towards those areas of law thought to constitute the core of a general law degree and provide an opportunity to expand and build upon these core subjects. In the last 2 or 3 decades, the optional part of the curriculum has undergone a number of noteworthy changes. The advent of courses directed towards new or emerging areas of law, such as environmental law. I can assure you, when I went to law school, there was no such course called environmental law. There's also significant numbers of courses at Canadian law schools dealing with information technology. And there are also more courses of a specialized nature, for example, health law, which has become a very popular subject over the last 10 or 15 years. You will also see greater specialized courses as long-standing areas of law have been narrowed and indeed recategorized or classified into small subspecies of these particular courses. You will see greater number of interdisciplinary courses and courses with international focus, the latter two categories reflecting an interest in law's relationship with the larger society and the phenomena called globalization. Finally, in recent years, Canadian law schools have begun to offer more clinical courses and courses directed specifically towards the ethical or value dimensions of law and practice. This law school has a long-standing commitment to legal ethics, and indeed we have had legal ethics as a mandatory course since 1975. The clinical movement is not as pronounced in Canada given the bar admission requirements of articles with an experienced lawyer and varying bar admissions programs of differing purpose and intensity across the various provincial jurisdictions. The program you're entering reflects this basic form and content. It is a 3-year program of full-time, and I emphasize full-time except for those of you who are in the part-time program, leading to the JD or Juris Doctor degree. And let me end one popular rumor now. No, you don't get to call yourself doctor. Okay? It's an undergraduate degree. It just has that ring of Juris Doctor. We're following the Americans. It gives you a heightened, I don't know, recognition, whatever. But it is not changing the essential nature of the degree. Our first-year program, similar to that in other Canadian law schools, is mandatory, consists of core, private, and public law subjects, torts, contracts, criminal law, constitutional law, and property, a moot court exercise, a legal writing and research program, and an introductory course on law and the legal system referred to by the Dean, entitled, in our case, Foundations to Law. The first year it lays the groundwork to put into place fundamental legal concepts and principles, to begin the development of legal research and writing skills, and to embark you on learning oral advocacy and communication skills. After the successful completion of the first year, and it is, as the Dean pointed out, largely the case that it is usually successful, you will proceed to the upper level of the program consisting of 7 mandatory and 13 optional subjects, 60 credit hours, which are designed to be taken over those 2 years. Now, the optional courses build on, broaden, and deepen your core legal knowledge. They further the development of legal skills, allow you to critically study law from a variety of theoretically informed perspectives, and to consider it in not only a professional but a broader social, economic, and political context. Altogether, this faculty offers over 90 optional and mandatory courses taught by 33 full-time faculty and 59 sessionals. While the program remains wedded to the academic preparation of graduates for professional legal practice, it is far broader in terms of its scope and depth and richer in terms of its content. It better prepares you as graduates for both the private practice of law in an ever-changing and specialized market for legal services, and also for careers in business and government. The materials and methodology of legal education has changed significantly over the last 100 years, particularly over the last 15 years or so with the advent of modern informational technology. Law students still study cases, but these are drawn from a much wider and readily accessible range of sources, increasingly digital. There is some doubt as to whether or not we need law libraries anymore. Unfortunately, we were involuntarily put in that position this summer when the University of Alberta decided to close the law library for the summer, and that particular resource was not available. Today, you as a law student have to deal with an overwhelming array of legal sources and material, often instantly available. The beauty of law study in my day was you could wait months for a judgment to come out. Until it actually came out, well, you didn't have to really worry about it. You have to worry about it that morning. It is on the internet. It is in publication, if it is of great magnitude. Your challenge is no longer to find legal authority. You can essentially find legal authority for any proposition. That's what the American realists said. How can you have a structure relying on previous authority when you can find authority for anything you want? Your challenge is to manage and effectively use an enormous quantity of readily available authority. It can involve both legal and non-legal materials, which overall will require from you a higher level of research sophistication. The methodology of legal education has changed significantly. The study of cases and statutes remains the same, but the use of the Socratic method featured in movies has largely fallen by the wayside. There are very few John Housemans anymore teaching 1L or whatever the name of that movie was, The Paper Chase, back in the early 1970s. I know, that's nearly 50 years ago, but it was very influential when I went to law school. Let's just put it that way. In large classes, most instructors use a form of lecture, increasingly relying on information technology in their presentation. Websites such as Twitter are used to electronically exchange information, new materials, share problems, and to facilitate class discussion. In smaller classes, instructors may use problems, case studies, role-playing, student presentations to spark discussion and debate. And in a small but growing number of clinical courses, experiential methods are employed to allow students to learn by doing. Over the last decade, law students have largely moved from pen and paper to taking notes and conducting research electronically. Instructors no longer face a sea of faces, but an array of laptop computers, which has made, in an increasing number of cases, for a more passive form of instruction, with students simply apparently taking notes, or I'm told other things are occurring, but that is too much of an ego bashing to believe that you could be taking nothing down more than my notes. Now, while the 20th century model of university legal education has proved to be both resilient and adaptable, it is fair to say that we're in a period of challenge and change. The practice of law, as has been indicated in previous comments, has changed significantly over the last 10 years. It has become more competitive, more specialized. Large corporate firms are increasingly regional, national, and international in their practices and orientation. Large corporate firms don't represent individuals anymore, they represent organizations. They don't represent people. They represent organizations, institutions. Lawyers are confronted by new competitors in the market for legal services. In the United Kingdom and Australia, legal services are now offered by alternative business structures, or ABSs, as part of a wider range of products and services available to consumers. Indeed, one of the leading grocery store chains in the United Kingdom now offers storefront legal services. You go in there, you get your legal services, routine, mundane, accessible, but it's all part of a consumer-driven movement that substantially undermines the professional quality of legal services. There is renewed interest in multidisciplinary practices, as was alluded to earlier. That is, lawyers practicing with accountants and persons from other disciplines. Competition is heightened with the recognition of so-called independent paralegals in some jurisdictions, and the high cost of legal services has led to larger and larger numbers of self-represented litigants. Now, as was pointed out, some of these self-represented litigants are there because they simply cannot afford you. We charge a lot. We sometimes have to ask why. After all, we're in the business of public service, not in the business of getting rich. On the other hand, we have people who Much like everything the internet tells us, if you can read something or read the internet, you can do everything from build bombs to represent yourself. Same kind of disastrous consequences. But at the end of the day, it presents a real challenge for lawyers. We have to continue to make ourselves relevant. We have to continue to make ourselves accessible. Otherwise, we will be putting ourselves out of work. The legal profession has responded to competitive pressures through greater specialization, more efficient practice to keep costs under control. Modern law practice features greater reliance on information technology, the outsourcing of research, and routine work to offshore providers who can provide legal services at $20 or $22 an hour as opposed to $200, $300, $400 an hour. Demands for greater productivity on the part of lawyers is a feature of modern law practice, and regrettably, as has been alluded to, there are fewer job opportunities for young lawyers. At the end of the day, the legal profession in Canada is a much larger and diverse occupation, operating in a more competitive and crowded market for legal services. It is an increasingly fragmented and stratified profession, with vast distances between those who practice in national corporate law firms and those persons who can solo practice in small communities across Canada. This has created challenges for the historic model of self-regulation or governance. Indeed, in other common law jurisdictions, self-regulation has been significantly redefined or replaced by greater government oversight. I appreciate what Karsten Jensen said about independent regulation. It sounds better. But what lawyers do is regulate themselves. Lawyers regulate lawyers. So it's regulation of lawyers, by lawyers, and some may suggest for lawyers, to paraphrase Lincoln. Legal education has not been immune from these challenges. Greater numbers of law graduates have strained the system of articling to perhaps the breaking point in Ontario, for example, in Ontario, leading it to meet the demand for pre-admission experiential training through the establishment of a formal course of study as an alternative to articles. The success of this initiative may lead to its adoption in other jurisdictions, and ultimately the end of articles as the sole means of preparation for professional practice. Also, the changed practice environment, the high cost of legal education, have led many within and without the profession and the legal academy to question the efficacy, structure, and sustainability of contemporary legal education. We're active participants in this respect. At the end of the month, as the Dean pointed out, we will host an international conference on the future of law school, featuring presentations from leading scholars and commentators on this question. It is suggested by many that universities have failed today because there is a skills gap. That is, what they teach people to do does not prepare them to go to work. That is fundamentally at odds when universities see their task, which is simply to do something more than prepare people to undertake a particular job. This law school believes in the latter. We will train you how to think like a lawyer, is the popular phrase. To analyze law, to think about problems in different and helpful ways. To be able to shift from different circumstances and to be able to craft unique and incredibly innovative solutions. Now, you have entered law school at a challenging and exciting time. You can expect to confront significant changes. Many are already underway in the practice of law, and have been already underway in the practice of law over the last decade. These changes will in turn lead to changes in the structure, length, and content of legal education as the traditional course of academic study reacts to new demands and pressures. However, I believe that what we offer you is the best opportunity to cope with a period of change. That is, we provide you with basic knowledge, basic skills, basic values, which you can then take and use to meet the various challenges that will confront you as you move ahead in the early part of your career. Now, I end with a few general comments. It has been said before, please bear in mind you're entering a new field of study. You are very accomplished, but you won't get the same grades that you did in your pre-law undergraduate or graduate program. I want you to understand that. You're now competing in a new program with new colleagues who are also very academically gifted. You may not find yourself in your usual place at the head of the class, even though you're working hard in your studies. Don't be overly disappointed or unusually frustrated. Simply understand this is a situation you were in and focus on getting the best education that you can. It is not, as I said, about grades. It is about learning, building values, and developing skills to last a lifetime. It is, for many of you, about preparing yourself for practice in a changing market for legal services, in a market marked by uncertainty, change, and heightened competition. You should view your formal legal education as an opportunity to prepare yourself for a future career which may take you in a number of directions. Take full advantage of every opportunity. Explore the possibilities offered by the program. Don't view law school as an obstacle to your future career. While in moments of frustration and boredom you may feel this way, don't succumb to this notion. This is not the obstacle. You fought hard to get in here. You fought hard to have this opportunity. Opportunities are not obstacles. And yet there is a tendency once you're in law school to say, gee, I just wish the next 3 years would get over and I can get out there and practice law. That's kind of a disconnect. This is where we start you in getting ready to do that practice. Try and see value in everything you're asked to learn, and remember that nothing of any value occurs without hard work. Although not immediately obvious to you, there is a purpose to everything we do here. If you make the most of what our program offers, then you will be in the best position in terms of securing your future success. I want to warn you about a few matters arising out of our growing use of information technology. Be careful in using social networking sites. What goes on these sites may harm you and your colleagues in the future. Don't take pictures of your colleagues, faculty, and classes without consent. There is an article in the newspaper today that Geraldo Rivera, remember him? He opened up Capone's vault and found absolutely nothing. Well, he decided he would take a picture of himself without clothes in the shower, selfing or something like this. It's some new skill set that he's discovered. And as he found out as a result that he's been dropped on a panel that's dealing with the 50th anniversary of John F. Kennedy's assassination, and he's deeply concerned. Because after all, he was part of the lead story on that. Well, the lesson is an easy one. Take your clothes off the shower, put your clothes on if you're taking photographs. Particularly when you're past 70. Now, the same comment can be made about recording class lectures and discussions. You cannot do this without the consent of the instructor. Don't misuse computers in class. Computers are a welcome assist in many classes, or a useful learning tool when used appropriately. So apart from my doubt about the value of coming to class to play games on your computer, I would ask that you be considerate of those around you. Don't distract them with your game playing. If you come to class, don't play games. Not only is it disrespectful, it is distracting. Regrettably, the faculty has also become aware of the use of personal computers and social networking websites to make fun of, demean, and defame other students. This has had a chilling effect in the classroom as these students are reluctant to participate for fear of being subject to cyber abuse or bullying. Simply put, there's no place for such behavior in the faculty or elsewhere in the university. Students who engage in such activity are not only breaching university rules, they are acting in a manner which contravenes the very purpose of law, which is to ensure to the greatest degree possible individual freedom in thought, action, and expression. A few words about civility are also in order. The best posture is that of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Treat your classmates with civility. Don't be uncivil or offensive in your emails to professors or to any member of the administration for that matter. Computers are a useful way to express your frustration. But remember, would you say the same things face-to-face with somebody? And so if you wouldn't, don't through an email. Take care in composing your emails and remember that once sent, they can never be taken back. The record, I'm told, always remains. A failure on the part of a professor to respond immediately does not mean that he or she is not working on or addressing your issues. It simply means that, given the press of other matters, a response will take some time. Don't misbehave at law school functions. What you do reflects poorly on all of us and may lead to a lifelong reputation, the subject of a story that everyone loves telling and embellishing to your discredit for the rest of your career. Have fun. Keep it within bounds. Remember, you've joined a community consisting of classmates, professors, sessional lecturers, administrators, and administrative staff. You have a responsibility to the continued vitality and coherence of that community, and its values of individual dignity, equality, and respect. In closing, please remember my colleagues and I are here to help you, to teach you, to guide you, to advise you, to make sure that you make the most of your time at law school. Use us, don't abuse us. And bear in mind, you play a large role in the quality of your education. Engage with your subjects and your professors. Remember that law has a long history as an active rather than a passive form of learning. Care about what you do and how you do it. If you do so, you're a long ways towards achieving what we all wish for you, a sound preparation for a successful life and career. Thank you. At this point, I will now introduce you to first-year professors and some of the first-year mentors. And I thank my colleagues for their patience in giving us a few minutes. Sure. Wherever you feel most comfortable. About room for 17. Sure. Okay, we now turn to an exciting portion of the program where I get to introduce you to a number of my colleagues, many of whom will be teaching you or serving as a mentor to you in the first year. A short biography of them is included in your program, and believe me, it does poor service to their achievements. They, like their colleagues who are not with us here today, are consummate teachers and accomplished researchers whose passion for their areas of scholarly activity reminds us of the rich potential of law, its study and practice. I'm simply going to introduce them, say perhaps a word or two about them, maybe use a nickname in respect to them. If they don't have a nickname, it's because I can't share it here today or because I haven't given them a nickname. But it is a way of putting a face to a name, and I'm delighted they're able to join us. First and foremost, we have Professor Tamara Buchwald, who teaches debtor-creditor law, commercial law, and is perhaps the most sophisticated dresser on faculty. Secondly, we have my colleague, Peter Carver. Peter is a teacher of constitutional law, administrative law, immigration law. He is well-read on almost an endless range of subjects. He serves a very important purpose in the law school. For 6 months, he is one of the few people who talks to Lewis Clark. And he is an expert in baseball. Gail Henderson. She's a new member of faculty. She joined us. Come around and stand here so the people on this side of the room can see you.
Commenting on my height now.
No, I'm not. I'm commenting on the layout of the room. New member of faculty joined us 1st of January last year. Takes real courage to come to this faculty 1st of January in any year. She teaches corporations and contracts and is a graduate of Osgoode Hall Law School. Cameron Jeffries, a recent graduate, completing his doctoral studies at the University of Virginia. He has a fascination for sharks. We live on the prairies. But he has a fascination for sharks.
Not that far away.
So I've given him the nickname the Shark. Very, very nice guy. Has nothing to do, when you think about sharks as malevolent predators, it has nothing to do with Mr. Jeffries. Eran Kaplinsky. Eran is a property law expert, an adherent of the law and economics school to a degree. He is a strong aficionado of soccer. It perhaps is his true love. And beyond that, I cannot tell you anything about Eran. There is a gap in his history that he refuses to share with anyone, so you're just going to have to take that as a matter of mystery. Then Matt Lewins. No, Lewis Clark, I'm sorry. Yeah, I know. Lewis Clark, former dean, one of Canada's preeminent tort scholars. He's an absolutely great teacher, a fantastic raconteur, a very funny man, very knowledgeable guy, and I'm pleased to say one of my friends. Matthew Lewins, a public lawyer with interests in constitutional administrative law, public law theory. He has a wicked sense of humor, and comes from Saskatchewan. I don't know if either one of those are connected. Avery McNary joins us after 30 years of public service with the Alberta Justice. She teaches tort law and coaches a competitive moot and has provided us with perhaps a little more practical leavening in our academic program. Professor Aaron Nelson, a graduate of faculty, a member of our so-called health law group. Last year, the senior legal counsel of the Alberta Court of Appeal. This year, she's teaching torts, law and medicine, and another health law seminar in addition to coaching the health law moot. Shows the benefits of going away for a year. Hubaka Obogu, a graduate of this faculty, effective this year, a professor in the faculties of law and pharmacy. Another one of our health law experts. He's teaching law and medicine this year, and he is a very snappy dresser. If you want to know what's trending, simply check out what Hubaka is wearing. Shannon O'Byrne, a professor, a contract and corporate law expert, an extremely highly accomplished teacher. Many of you will be encountering her in contracts this year, and if not, then corporations in the next 2 years. Stephen Penny, a professor at the faculty, an expert in criminal law and procedure. He's an extremely skilled tennis player and serves right now as my colleague, the Associate Dean of Graduate Studies and Research. David Person, a distinguished professor, former dean, longtime teacher of contract law, and one of Canada's experts on water law and energy law. David has been here for a long time. He's a youthful-looking man. But if you want to put his age in perspective, he taught me. Now I live a lot more dissipated life than you do. I've tried not to exercise where possible. So that's probably the reason. Then we come to Professor Peter Sankoff, another recent appointment to the faculty, an expert in criminal and animal law. Everything he does is done with passion, intensity, and unfortunately he did not wear his hat, because my line was a man who wears many hats, both in terms of his subject matter and in terms of his personal head garb. Professor Chris Spryzak, the tax man cometh forth, the faculty expert on taxation and estate planning, a good citizen of this faculty, and the person, if you're taking tax, who you will encounter. Because we only have one taxation professor, Chris will never be going on a study leave. Stella Varmus. Stella joined us last year as the Director of Legal Writing and Research. She then was assigned responsibility for our competitive mooting program. Being that many decades ago the faculty member in charge of moots was known as the Czar of Moots, I've nicknamed her the Czarina of Moots. And I can say that we enjoyed perhaps our best year last year in terms of competitive mooting. And since she was in charge, she must take a lot of the credit. God knows when we don't have a very good year, she'll take all of the blame. Finally, Professor Darcy Vermette, who has joined us as of July 1, 2013. He adds to our expertise in constitutional and Aboriginal law, and I'd like to welcome him to the faculty. It's good that he is able to join us. So we have a coffee break now, according to my notes. We'll reconvene quite quickly after. The coffee is courtesy of Steve McDermott, Steve to everyone, the proprietor of Hello My Friend coffee shop on the first floor of the law school. Steve is a character, one of the nicest people you'll ever meet, a purveyor of coffees, teas, soft drinks, treats, and sandwiches. He's going to be one of the most important persons in your lives at the law school. He's a great source of back-channel information. Steve talks to everyone, so he'll tell you what's going on. To him, there's no such thing as a bad day. That includes some pretty horrific days in January, and I can tell you that Steve offers credit. So these are all good things. So we're going to have a coffee break now? Okay, and then you're going to do it? Do you want me to introduce you now? Okay, sure. Yeah, let's do it after the break. Okay, let's have our coffee break. Sorry, folks. We'll have a coffee break. We'll be back at 2:15, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dean Law.
We're on the homeward stretch. You've been a very cooperative and patient audience, so I appreciate that. Now I have to introduce two really important people at the law school. The first of these is Melissa Hartley, the assistant dean, who's showing significant modesty, does not want to come down and be introduced here, but she is the attractive-looking blonde lady in the back of the room. She's the assistant dean. You met the dean, you met me, you've met the associate dean, graduate studies and research. Melissa is the fourth member of a very difficult committee called the administrative team, which meets, what, once a week or thereabouts? Yeah. And she's responsible for facilities, operations management, financial management, staff development, research and teaching support, the administration of moots, payroll, student hiring, and room allocation. So she's in charge of money. She's a very important person. She's in charge of making sure we can live within our budget, which, as the dean indicated, seems to get smaller each and every passing year. So she will be a person that many of you will have an opportunity to check with if you're involved in various kinds of student groups or clubs, and she's always a very helpful member of our administrative staff. And finally, we come to a person who is indispensable to what I do, and that is Linda Sato, who is my assistant and the assistant to the dean. She found me not to be a sufficient challenge, not to have enough work to do, so she decided she'd take the dean on also. She's just a terrific person. She's really the brains behind the operation. I'm the good-looking one who is the front person. So she's the person that you will contact with lots of questions concerning courses, registration, program, examinations, stuff like this. Inevitably, she handles most of these issues and indeed deals with them in a very expeditious manner. And it's only when you prove to be intractable or unreasonable that she passes you to me, and I start to get involved. Anyways, Linda is a great resource, and really, I couldn't do my job without her, so Linda Sato. Now, finally, I am going to introduce you to Shannon Goldberg, who is the Director of Academic and Cultural Support, who in turn will introduce you to some of the folks who support your activities in a variety of ways. These colleagues are located largely on the first floor of the law school, titled Student Services Center, to assure easy access. If you have issues or questions concerning law school, personal problems, career placement, these will be the people who you should speak to first. That doesn't mean you should not speak to your professors about courses, legal education, or career counseling, but we all sort of work together as a team in sort of meeting your needs and addressing your issues. Now, earlier today, it was suggested by Madam Justice Bealby that you could have an incredibly rewarding career should you go to Northern Canada. Shannon Goldberg took that advice how many years ago? 25 years ago, when she started practice in Yellowknife. And as she has so aptly put it, she's a person who you should deal with when she asks you to deal with her, as she can hunt and trap. And she knows how to do it. She's been a tremendous addition to our staff, starting with us last March, and has really helped in building up our academic support and cultural support. So with that, I turn you over to Shannon, and she will introduce you to some of her colleagues in student services.
Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing? Good? A little overwhelmed so far? Okay. And that's where student services comes in, because we're here to make sure that you're successful in your law school career. And that's not a one-person job. So I want to start by introducing the phenomenal staff in student services. And maybe it's not on the order on your screen, but maybe if we can switch it around a little bit. So we'll start with Kim. Kim and I formed an immediate bond when I came here in March. She says, "I'm short, you're short, this is a good thing." So it was that immediate bond. But Kim is there, and I bet you probably 99% of the people who have spoken to Kim in regard to anything dealing with admissions and records, any of those questions you had when you were attempting to get into law school or shortly after your acceptance, you've spoken to Kim. And that's her job, and any of those sorts of issues that come about, please talk to Kim. Next, we have Gloria Strathern. Gloria is our administrative assistant, and by that I mean she runs like the wind, just go, go, go. I mean, if Gloria tells you to do something, you do it, because that means it's going to get done. Gloria is also responsible for financial aid, scholarships, awards, and bursaries. And again, I know many of you have either met with Gloria or have spoken to her on the phone in terms of those issues. So if you have issues with respect to financial aid, scholarships, those things, Gloria is your go-to person. Next, we have Pat Neal. This may seem a far way off, but Pat's our career development officer. And Pat will be running a session with you on Friday morning, as well as Thursday at noon, to get you set up so that you know how to use the website for looking for job offers and things like that. So we'll leave it at that for now, but she'll be your go-to person for all of those issues. And last but certainly not least, we have Sharon Mills, who's the secretary, the friendly face when you walk into student services. And if you're not sure who you should be speaking to, Sharon will point you the right direction. I'm confident of that. So thank you, ladies. And these are individuals you'll be seeing a lot. I want to talk briefly about the program that we've set up for you this fall. And this is building on bits and pieces of things that were in existence in the past, but really trying to put it into a new format. And our program's designed to make sure that you're academically successful. We're here to make sure you're dealing with personal and academic difficulties. And then there's a cultural component to it as well. In my brief time here, I can tell you that one of the common threads I've seen has been students who are struggling, and sort of following up on some of the themes we've seen this afternoon. Students who have a lot going on personally or health-wise, and they're keeping their mouths shut. And I think that's very old school, and it's going to be harmful to your legal career. If you are having trouble, please make sure you come and see me. We're here to help. Part of that program this year is going to be seminars. Some of it will be direct student support services, and some of it will be special events. And this is just going to be a snippet of what we've got prepared. One of the things we want to talk to make sure you're comfortable with this year is financial planning, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. We want to make sure that you're developing really good study skills. We want to have seminars on making your own case and note summaries, and some seminars on exam preparation. And some of the professors that you saw this afternoon have very graciously agreed to assist me in offering those programs. So you'll be seeing them in that context as well. Part of our program will be specific support services as well. We're going to institute a Dean's Fellows program, and that will be upper year students who are going to be trained and then be in a position to assist you with academic struggles. And they may do that through having tutorial sessions, through telling you about references or study skills that worked for them, reviewing specific legal issues that you say, I'm really having a trouble with this tort concept, for example. They'll be there to help you. Those would be upper year students who have a solid academic record and also that ability to interact well, and we feel we'll be in a good place to help you. There's also a faculty mentor program some of the individuals you already had wave at you this afternoon. Those individuals are there to help you. If you're dealing with program requirements, faculty rules and regulations, just struggles generally, speak to those faculty mentors. Some of you will meet them when you go off on your tours today. Many of you won't meet them in your groups today, but you were provided with a sheet that tells you who your mentor is. And if they don't meet with you this afternoon, they will be in touch with you. There'll also be one-on-one assistance and referrals. That's where I come in as well. If you're struggling with personal and academic issues, I'll be the person that you'll want to go to try and assist you with those issues. And I'm happy to do so. That's just a snippet of some of the specific programs that we have in place. There'll also be some very specific special events that we're putting into place. The Law Students Association, and they'll be chatting momentarily, they determined last year that their number one issue they wanted to tackle in the upcoming academic year was mental health. And so I took that to heart as being something that, in my role, I needed to be assisting them with. And so based on that, we've got some special events designed around that. We're going to have the Chimo puppies come in. Has anyone heard of the Chimo puppies? No one? You'll hear about the Chimo puppies. They're puppies that are specially trained. They will come into the law school around exam time. And when I first heard about the Chimo puppies, I can tell you, I was like, what are these? And I knew I had to look into this and make this a go because it was such a big thing for the Law Students Association. We have them coming in. And when you think about it, it's really kind of a cool idea. The idea that these animals relieve stress and are there to help you through exam time. So they're coming. There's a Walk for Wellness on September 25th going to the downtown core, and I'll be helping you lead that, those who are interested in going. That Walk for Wellness is run by ASSIST, and ASSIST is the sidearm of the Law Society of Alberta that is there to assist lawyers when they're dealing with issues, be it addictions, mental health, physical challenges, practice management, where they are so overwhelmed they don't know what they're doing. That's what ASSIST is there for. So one of their things that they're supposed to be running is making sure people are mentally healthy, and they're doing their Walk for Wellness, and you'll hear more about that. And then we're hoping to do some other mental health initiatives in conjunction with the Law Students Association, who, as I say, that was their prime objective to tackle this year. So I'm really happy to be involved in those issues. I want to backtrack a little bit now, if you'll indulge me. And it's my pleasure to welcome Rachel DeLeon. Rachel is the Bursary Program Coordinator over at Student Financial Aid. And Rachel graciously agreed to come in for a few minutes today and just give you a snippet about what she's going to talk about when she comes in to talk to you about financial planning later this month. Rachel.
Thank you, Shannon. So I'm very honored just to come and have the chance just to talk with each of you because you are beginning your law programs. And so often you're not thinking about the financial part of it because you're really focused on the academic part of it. And so our financial aid office is located in the Students' Union building here on campus. And that financial aid office helps you with your student loans, as simple as a question of should I even apply or why would I apply for a student loan? What's the difference between that and a line of credit? What are my financial options while I'm a student here? What other things may I not be aware of that I am eligible for in terms of bursaries? Not a lot of scholarship information, what we give you, but mostly bursaries. What are other financial supports? We have emergency loan programs just to help you with some of those gaps in funding. So maybe your funding isn't coming in yet, and you're worried about how am I going to pay rent when I have to pay tuition and all that kind of stuff. So we certainly can walk through that process with you individually just to make sure that you're on top of that as well as on your academic schedules. That's where the faculty comes in to support you with that. So on the 19th, there is I think it's a lunchtime session where we're just going to have a presentation just to help you just set up your, at the beginning, we're trying to be proactive in helping students to kind of get right at the beginning. How can I manage my finances really well, be on top of everything, and know what all of my options are in order so that's not a concern for me so that I can focus on my academics. So that's part of what we're going to be presenting. And so our service in the Students' Union Building is a walk-in, drop-in, a phone-in service, so feel free just to contact us at any time. And again, just to make sure that you are feeling confident that you have all the information you need and can have that financial piece covered and not have to worry about that. Thank you. Thanks, Shannon.
I just want to touch briefly as well. I indicated there'll be a cultural support program, and again, we're just giving you some snippets today. There is going to be geared for our Aboriginal students, but certainly welcome to anybody, orientation on Friday morning. That'll be our Indigenous Student Services orientation. And in conjunction with the Aboriginal Law Students Association, we'll be running an Aboriginal speaker series later in the year. And whether you're Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal, you're not sure, if you're interested in those issues with respect to Aboriginal people, minority rights, things like that as well, that group may be something of interest to you, and you'll hear more about them in the coming weeks. So again, trying to make sure that there's a strong cultural support as well. Two key messages I really want to leave here today, and I know I alluded to this, but student services. Number one, we're here to help. So please take advantage of that, as Vice Dean Law said. People are here to help. Don't sit there struggling. And if you are struggling with personal or academic problems, please come to see me. I am confident that you are going to have a wonderful first-year law school. 28 years ago, probably close to the day, I sat in this very room where you are, and I can tell you that this law school is second to none, and owes apologies to no other law school. I can also tell you, because I'm building on that thread that you're hearing this afternoon, think outside the box. I had a chance to stay here in Edmonton to article. I had a chance to go to Wetaskiwin. I had a chance to go to Yellowknife. And my gut kept saying, go to Yellowknife, go to Yellowknife, go to Yellowknife. Best 25 years of my life. And I guarantee you, if you take those opportunities, they will pay off. While I was articling, I was second chair on an attempted murder trial. By my 5th year practice, I was president of the Law Society. That's not going to happen here. I strongly encourage you, look at those opportunities. Mr. Gurvich is going to be talking to you. Certainly, nothing wrong with the big firms, nothing wrong with the middle-sized firms. Those are other opportunities. But open yourself up to possibilities. You're at the start of your career. Don't narrow the box too quickly. Thank you very much.
Okay, at this point, we're going to shift focus a bit and talk about getting involved. In particular, introduce you to some of the student organizations and activities in the law school. You will find in your materials there's an insert which gives you an idea of the range and kinds of student clubs and activities which are associated with this particular faculty. There is something there for everyone in addition to the opportunities that are offered at the university. We refer to this faculty as a sociable faculty. I don't want to call it a party school, but a sociable faculty where everybody seems to get along very well, which is always a good thing. So at this point, we're going to hear from the president of the Law Student Association, Adil Mullah, and the coordinator of Student Legal Services, Austin Corbett. We're going to introduce you to their organizations, which play a vital role in the law school community. Participation in the activities of the LSA and the SLS is one of a number of ways you can broaden and enrich your law school experience. It's been my experience that almost everyone in the first year class, or pretty close to everyone, gets involved in SLS. Some people become diehard thereafter and make it a commitment, perhaps too much of a commitment at the expense of their studies, but it is, I guess, those kind of experience which sort of drags you in. We also have somebody from the law show, I understand.
Yep.
Okay. Adil will also be talking about the law, so she's going to do double duty. So I give you these gentlemen and let them tell you about their activities.
All right. Thank you, Professor Law. Hello, welcome. Clearly, I don't need a mic. So yeah, my name's Adil. I'm with the Law Students Association. Some of my team is over there, who I will introduce you to in a few seconds. But yeah, welcome. It's going to be one heck. I was going to say hell. I can say hell. Yeah. It's going to be one hell of a year. You're going to have a great, great, great time. You're going to exercise your minds, and it's going to be good. It's going to be stressful. It's going to be fun, but it'll be good. You can take that to the bank. So, I have no idea what I'm looking at, so here we go. Oh, let's see. Okay. Okay, so how to get involved at the U of A Law. Getting involved is huge. You really, really, really should, take as many opportunities as possible to get involved and really, really flesh out your time here. Like, don't just worry about the books. Don't just worry about the things that you need to learn for class. That'll come. You're studious people. You're all go-getters. So that will happen. We just don't want any of you committing suicide. So, with that in mind, try to get involved. Try to really enjoy each other's company. Build a support network. I probably shouldn't have said what I said, but you'll get to know me. I say stuff like that all the time. So, how to get involved? One of the things is LSA, Law Students Association. It's a $55 membership. You will see a horde of people just right outside these doors. Tomorrow, the day after, and the day after that, we'll be selling memberships. It's $55, and what your membership gets you is a locker for the year, which is pretty big because you'll find out how big your books are, and you're not going to be able to carry them around all the time. An opportunity to purchase cans. So what cans are they are condensed annotated notes. It's basically the notes and study guides from previous years, so my study guides, other people's study guides that we've purchased, and then we sort of allow you guys to purchase them from us. Now, one of the things I have to say is it's not a substitute for doing your own reading and that sort of thing. It's just supposed to help you, maybe keep you on track. If you're confused about something, it's there for you, but please do your readings and stuff like that. I don't want to advocate people just buying cans and then not doing the readings because Professor Law is going to come get me. The other thing that you will be able to get is a student directory, also known as a Who's Who. It's quite exciting when this thing comes out. It's basically all your pictures, and the professors like to have them as well, so they get to know your names. But it's mostly for us to creep on each other. So just so you know, I'm being honest here. And also, your membership fee gets you access to intramural sports and tournaments. Intramural sports, we've got volleyball, basketball, like just everything under the sun. And tournaments, 2 tournaments that are coming up. Actually, one's in the second semester. One that's coming up really soon, not this Friday, next Friday, is the golf tournament. We have a shotgun start for the first time, so that's going to be awesome. And your membership card will have discounts at local places, local venues, and for some of our events as well. Some of our events are open to not just law students. So for those, if you have an LSA membership, you'll get like $10 off, whereas if you didn't, it'd be, $10 more. That was your quick lesson in math for today. And basically, the LSA maintains the gavel, so downstairs in the student lounge. We keep it clean and tidy and running. We run the elections. There's one in September for first-year representatives, which you guys will hear all about in the coming days. I would really advise that if you're that sort of person and you want to get involved and you really, really want to be on maybe on the executive and sort of help make some of the bigger decisions or help run some of the social events, that you try out for the first-year rep. And none of our first-year reps are here, but that's fine. Our former first-year reps, none of them are here. But they can for sure say it was a good time, and they learned a lot. So let's move on. We've been on that slide for way too long. Social events, pre-orientation. I got to meet a few of you yesterday. Hopefully you guys had a great time. The next big one is First Friday Back, which will be Friday. It's going to be unreal. It's going to be at Knoxville Tavern, which is downtown, and that should be a good time. We've got what's known as FABs. They're Friday afternoon beer socials. There's a handful of them throughout the year, and it's basically us hanging out downstairs in the Gavel, just mingling, having a beer, relaxing. Law Students Appreciation Night, this will be announced later on, but it'll be at Hudson's or Sherlock's or something like that, where basically like local venues say, thanks for bringing in all the business and spending all your money here. As they should. Carbolic Smoke Ball, you'll get the pun there later. It's going to take a little bit. But it's based on a case. You'll figure it all out. But it's basically our formal, and it's a big deal. Everybody gets dressed up, and you feel fancy for a night, and then it's back to schleppiness. And the end of exams party, which is just epic, because you guys have, we've all been through exams, and, it's a good time. So, this is the team. I am there, acting a fool, as usual. Vice President General Connor Fleming, he's not here, but you'll see him soon. Scott Meyer, he's over there in the corner. He's VP External. VP Finance, Kathleen Cloutier, she's not here as well. VP Academic, Ian Walker, wave to them, Ian, wave to the lovely people. VP Sports, Steve's working on El Jaco, the golf tournament. VP Social, Laura Koppel, she's away for now. Faze, you probably got to meet yesterday with the pre-orientation, some of you. He's the other VP Social. VP Services, Kiri Jutla, wave to them, otherwise known as Rudolph. And VP Services 2L GSP. No, Kizza, sorry. Oh, good, I got a laugh. I've been working on that for a week. No. And there we go, the 1L reps to be decided. It could be you, and those will be your duties. That's exactly what you're going to be doing. What else? Law Show. I will quickly talk about Law Show just briefly. It's a huge thing. It's an institution. We love it. We're very proud of it here. Mike will talk to you more about the behind-the-scenes stuff, but we're looking for actors, dancers, singers, people who can play instruments, especially drummers. Any drummers? Any drummers out there? Please? No? All right, we'll hire somebody. Fine. And it's 200 students that get involved in this thing. It's unreal. And we write it, we choreograph, we compose the stuff. And it's something that we're very proud of. No other school does it. A lot of other schools do talent shows and multimedia. We actually write this thing in-house. It's all us. So it's something we're very proud of, and we should be proud of it. And you guys will be proud of it too. By the end of your year as well. And basically, we raised about $30,000 for the Zebra Foundation. So all the proceeds go to a charity. And this year it's Zebra Foundation. Next year we're going to be looking at someone else. Can you guys hear me? My voice is kind of going after last night. Intramural sports. See? All that lovely stuff. I'm not a sporting guy, so I'll just let you look at the pictures and decide for yourself. Van Ordinaire, it's if you like wine, and who doesn't? This is definitely the group for you. It's we get together and we talk wine and we get to be more fancy than we should be. Writing and editing. One of the huge things here is Alberta Law Review. You get to help edit articles from profs and other important people in the community. And Canons of Construction, which is our little law newspaper. Should be coming out, the first edition should be coming out in a few weeks. And that's huge because we get to write about our own experiences. There's a few joke editorials, a few articles about stuff that's going on campus and going on in our building specifically. So if you like to write, check these two out. And a whole list of clubs. I will actually be putting a list of clubs outside this door in a few minutes. So you guys can go and grab them. It's just all the clubs. That are here. It's basically going to be a printout of that page right there. And if you have any questions, we have the clubs fair on the 10th. So all the clubs will be there, and all the clubs, their leaders will be there, so you can ask them all kinds of questions you want, what kind of a commitment there is, and what sort of skills or talents are required. It'll be on the 10th in the hallway just outside from 11 to 2. And of course, if you have any other questions, you can stop any one of us in the hallway. You can swing by the LSA office, which is 157 downstairs, the fishbowl-looking room. And we have a bulletin board as well, and you can just, go check it out. And we're going to talk about Law Show now. So Mike, come on down. So good luck next year, and we'll see you around.
together a little bit of a PowerPoint for you guys so you can see kind of what it's like. We have actors, as you see there. We also have some singers, some band, dancing, of course. Adil's really pushing the costumes and makeup this year, so everybody can look as good as they can. See a witch there. We also have special guests and celebs. There's actually Adil. Bender. Okay, now what I'm actually supposed to talk about. So, although the production positions, which is what I'm going to talk about, they may not have the glitz and glamour of the theatrical side, they're essential to ensuring that both nights of the Law Show run smoothly, and that our sponsor gets a large donation. Last year we were fortunate enough to be able to donate over $25,000, and we couldn't have done it without everyone's help. For those who aren't as comfortable as, say, Adil in the spotlight, there are still a wide range of opportunities to get involved with Law Show. These activities range in degree of involvement and corresponding time commitment. This year we still have 2 assistant positions available on our executive, which could be filled by a 1L. They are the marketing assistant as well as the assistant social convener. Also each year we do have 3 first-year representatives on our exec. So with the 1L rep positions, they're an excellent way to learn how the show runs. And since the majority of the assistants move on to take on over the positions in the future years, it's also important for those aspiring producers and directors. So that's basically where we get our talent. You start at the bottom and you rise up with the Law Show. You grow with it. No previous experience is necessary for these positions, and it's a great way to learn and get to know upper years. If you're looking for something less involved, we also recruit volunteers for marketing and silent auction. In these roles, volunteers help contact law firms for sponsorship and organize donations for the silent auctions that we have during intermission on both nights of the show. These positions are a great way to improve your networking skills with law firms and with other members of the legal community. Lastly, if you don't have much time, we also recruit volunteers for just the 2 days of the show to help out with silent auction, will call, and code check. One of the nice things with Law Show is we do have a cast party. It's one of the better parties of the year, which is an opportunity after the first show for everybody to kind of relax, celebrate having one show under our belt, go for a couple of beverages, and just have a good time and enjoy everyone's company. And like I mentioned, it is one of the best parts of the year. If you're interested in any of the positions, theatrical or production or anything to do with Law Show, we will have our booth at the club show or at the club fair on the Tuesday, September the 10th, from 11 to 2. You should also feel free to drop by if you have any questions, Law Show related or not. The current members of our exec will be happy to chat with you. All right, thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Austin, and I'm the Director of Student Legal Services this year. Student Legal Services is one of the oldest and largest student-run legal clinics in Canada. We generally have about 260 student volunteers who take part in one of our projects or in several of our projects every year. We have a criminal law project, a civil law project, Pro Bono Students Canada chapter, and a legal reform and education project. All these projects are a great way to kind of take all the academic and theoretical learning that you're doing in school and really give it a practical base and try to use your skills to help real people with real problems who are facing legal consequences. It's a great way to get hands-on experience and give something back to the community. I'm not going to take too much more of your time. I wanted to let you know that next week we have several recruitment events going on, and we're going to have applications out for you to apply to Student Legal Services then. So on Tuesday, September 10th, I'm sure you've already been told that's the club's day. Student Legal Services will have a booth there from 11 to 2. You can come chat with us, ask any questions you like about the different projects, what they do, whether, court etiquette or anything else like that. And fill out an application for that. Also on Tuesday, September 10th from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m., we're going to have an SLS wine and cheese that's free for everybody. Come out, have a drink on us, come chat with us, maybe fill out an application, think about something you'd like to do to help us out. We're looking for a lot of support this year. We've got new projects started up in the last couple of years, including a civil claims duty counsel project where you can go to the court and help duty counsel lawyers in civil area. We're trying to get a family law project very similar off the ground maybe this year. So we're still expanding and we're still doing a lot of new things. It's a great experience to get down to the courtroom and try your hand at speaking in front of a judge and representing somebody who has a real issue or problem that they need help with. So once again, please come out. Most of our recruitment events are on Tuesday, September 10th, and I'll see you then. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Much appreciated. Particularly Mr. Muller, who had to leave. He is, based on my experience, the master of the overstatement. You will come to enjoy his enthusiasm, I'm sure, over the next year. At this point, we're going to turn to, I guess, the last major item in our program, and that is talking about, perhaps, practice in a smaller community in Alberta. The gentleman who has been sitting here for most of this program, just by that sheer fact alone, an extraordinary individual, because he has already gone to law school. He's got himself a QC, had a successful practice, and is the president of the Canadian Bar Association Alberta branch. A very engaged practitioner from Grande Prairie who has been on, how shall we say, a formal crusade to point out to people that there are benefits to practicing in a smaller community. You know, the trend over the last decade or so, if you don't go and join a big firm, if you don't join some sort of corporate hierarchy, that you really won't have a successful law career is one of the great falsities of our time. Many lawyers in the United States who truly do represent big law in every sense of the word find that they have traded a great deal for their rather significant paychecks. And large numbers of them over the years have indeed left big law and gone to work in other centers because they want a different pace of life, they want to make a different contribution, and indeed they want more balance in their life. So one of the things that indeed is not often thought of is the possibility of practicing outside the two great metropolises of Edmonton and Calgary. Most of the people I went to law school with did indeed practice outside these two great metropolises, and as already been alluded to by Madam Justice Bealby, two of them made it really a success. They struck the mother lode. They were the first full-time practitioners in Fort McMurray, and they have benefited extensively. One of them is a judge, which assures him a certain income security for the rest of his life. And the other one has a winery and apparently a gorgeous house overlooking Lake Okanagan to spend his retirement in. But they made their careers in a smaller community a great success. It was a risk, yes, but it was a great success. So I'd ask you to consider and listen closely to what Cyril Gurvich has to say. I'd ask you to remember that in addition to all the things that was cited you could take part in being a lawyer in a smaller community is you suddenly become a very big fish in a very small pond. Lawyers in smaller communities actually play a very large role, a much more significant role in the general community than lawyers in large communities. And indeed, you may find yourself elected to Parliament as one of the other benefits of being a lawyer in a smaller community. So with this, I will introduce you to Cyril Gurvich, who, as I said, has been a lawyer in Grande Prairie since 1980. He has practiced in a firm, Gurvich Burnham. He has worked as a general practitioner doing the kinds of work that every general practitioner does, and he's found it to be an enormously rewarding practice. So with that, I turn it over to the most patient man in the hall today, Cyril Gurvich. Thank you.
Well, this is a real pleasure. As Mr. Law has indicated, it's my duty and job today to perhaps put forward the argument for smaller firm practice, smaller center practice. And it's been my experience through the last year as president of the Canadian Bar Association to put forward a program to try and enhance the number of law students, articling students, and young lawyers coming to rural and regional centers outside of Calgary and Edmonton. And in fact, I have taken this nationally and put forward proposals that it take place all across Canada, because Alberta truly is not the only center that has this difficulty. To put some perspective on my years of experience, I can say that I graduated from this very law school in 1976. That was a time when Louis Clark, you met him earlier, had hair. That was a time when former Dean Percy didn't have white hair. And to put it in perspective, he was my law school contracts professor and the Professor Kingsfield equivalent. I did also manage to watch the Henderson winning goal in the 1972 Canada-Russia series in the common room downstairs. So that gives you some of the perhaps background. So today, they've given me approximately 25 minutes to tell you all about small town practice, or it's not even small town. When I talk about small communities, I'm talking about anything from 1,000 people on up to over 100,000. So we're really talking about everything outside of the greater metropolises of Calgary and Edmonton. So the first thing I'd like you to do is close your eyes and imagine yourself in your new law firm immediately after you graduate from law school, and imagine what that might look like. And if it looks like this, I would be surprised. That's where I've been working for the last 19 years. It was a building that we built in 1994, and it's the kind of opportunity that you would have perhaps outside of the major centers. And we'll just leave that up for you to watch while I'm speaking. Well, I'm here to try and broaden your imaginations and perhaps take you where you haven't gone before, and give you a different perspective on the large law firm panacea that may be in the major big Canadian cities, or as portrayed on U.S. commercial TV. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to start by telling you a bit about my story. And I don't think I'm unique. Maybe I am. I did come from Calgary, where I was born and raised. I went to first-year university there before moving to Edmonton, where I spent my second year of arts, and then went into the law program. I got married the day before third year law, and so I just passed my 38th year on August 31st with my wife, and we're still together. I worked upon graduation at the Attorney General's office. I articled there, and then for 3.5 years I worked on the civil side of the Attorney General's office. And so what I want you to understand is that I have some background in the major centers, and I think I have a bit of credibility because of that, because I can speak from both sides. And just curiosity, how many of you are actually from smaller centers outside of Edmonton and Calgary? Well, I see there's quite a number, so perhaps I'm speaking a bit to the converted. In any event, in 1980, I was feeling some frustration working for the large government department, and there seemed to be lots of rules and restrictions, and I had little chance of moving up the seniority ladder. When I had first arrived, or 2 years before I arrived, there were 5 lawyers in that department that were serving the province, and the province decided that it would second all of its work out to the major firms. Well, 2 years before, they decided to change that policy and to supply legal services for the province. So by the time I got there on graduation, there were 50 lawyers in the department, and they took on another 12 articling students. So that put seniority rather as a back seat. So for the first number of years, I worked on the civil side in the collections area. And at that time, I was doing work for a student finance board. I did the first Alberta healthcare collections. I was working as the Queen's Proctor That's something you guys may never hear about because I don't think they have the Post anymore. But it used to be in the rules of court. So I was doing REA collections and traffic sign damage, and the damage awards were in the hundreds of dollars and not much bigger than that. But I became so successful at that I became somewhat of a collections expert, and I really began to enjoy the work of civil litigation. But the complexity wasn't really there. I did get a chance to run some fatality inquiries, and those were very interesting and rewarding, but I was still looking for something more. I began looking for a new life, and I started looking in smaller centers outside of Edmonton, and I came across a sole practitioner in Grand Prairie. It wasn't anything grand at the time, but I was ready for a change. My initial interview was at an office that was located on Main Street right behind the barber shop, and right in the center of town. I walked into the office and I waded through the smoke because they were all smokers, and I think my former partner was a 3-pack-a-day guy. It was quite amazing, but the practice that he had was thriving, and he couldn't keep up. And so he asked me to take on the role of a civil litigator so that he could take on more of a solicitor's role with the corporate commercial real estate and wills and estates practice. And that turned out to be the start of the beginning, because I really was able at that point to take on cases for major banks and the business clients, and instead of dealing in the hundreds of dollars, I was dealing in the hundreds of thousands of dollars almost overnight. The work that I had done at the Attorney General's office was a perfect preview, because all it meant was adding zeros at the end of the statement on the damage claims, on the statements of claim. We kept all of our files in a large vault. So I think it had been a bank at one point along the way, and we locked it every night, and that was our filing cabinet. I'm getting ahead of myself, I'm sorry. In any event, when I got to Grand Prairie, we were able to, I got to know the business community, and I remember walking into the Royal Bank, which was our major client, and being able to walk up to every single loans officer there, greet them by first name, answer their hot call questions, and it was just an incredible change from the life I had started and what I imagine is the life in some of the major firms in Edmonton and Calgary. To say that in the larger firms you might not even see a client for the first 5 years, you might not get to handle anything more than a small part of a very large file, I don't think is an understatement. And so it was like overnight becoming part of a larger group. And we were invited to their openings, their Christmas parties, their golf tournaments, and the like. So the first lesson I learned was that the complex and senior files in Alberta don't find their limits at the boundaries of Calgary and Edmonton. The files I was able to handle, and there were no limits on this, were complicated and challenging. I learned the rules of court like the back of my hand. There was anything from commercial litigation, bank security enforcement, to family law, the thing we used to call divorces in the old days, and matrimonial property litigation. Every time my partner's corporate client had a difficulty, he was referred to me, and the range of problems was unending, from corporate shareholder disputes to collection to debts. There was child welfare, bankruptcies, adoptions, landlord and tenant, you name it, we did it. The only area that we didn't handle were criminal law cases, and we referred those out. We also didn't do tax. Those are areas that if you're interested, we'll always have work in smaller areas as well. I even did some administrative law. The point I'm trying to make is that everything was available to suit whatever you want to do. I can tell you one story about the criminal client that my partner had. As I said, he did the solicitor's work. when one day one of his longtime clients came in and insisted he was his lawyer and he had to take this criminal law case. In order to finally persuade him that he perhaps was not qualified, he asked him how long he would like to go away for, at which point the client then decided perhaps there was another way. Anyways, my partner at the time was extremely busy doing real estate companies, foreclosure, bank security preparation enforcement, wills and estates. There was never a shortage for him. And I remember in all of my 33 years in Grande Prairie, I remember 3-4 times max where I had caught up. And I couldn't believe it, and I was worried because I was afraid the next day, where's my next client coming from? And my partner said, don't worry. And sure enough, he was right. By the next day, I was so busy I didn't know which way was up. The funny thing, how we worry about small things, and really that's not something you're ever going to have to worry about in this province. Just so you know, that smoking environment I referred to earlier ended several years later with my partner becoming a physical activity fanatic, going from a 3-pack a day person to running marathons and cross-country skiing, including the 100-kilometer Birkenbinder here in Edmonton. But 21 years later, he died in an unfortunate motor vehicle accident when his bicycle ran into an 18-wheeler. I learned about it when I was in Edmonton at my 25th anniversary graduation party from law school. And I learned at that point that I was going to have to take over. We had 3 lawyers at that time, 3 partners at the time, and one partner passed away. The other one ceased wanting to practice in the firm, and so I was left with myself and 7 secretaries. I hadn't practiced much in the solicitor's field, but I can tell you that I certainly learned it over the next couple of years. It was a time of massive learning. And I went from a full-time litigator to a solicitor as well. In 1984, we decided to move from our small smoke-filled office to a 6-story office tower. It was nice, but the walls were thin and the rent was high. I remember my partner had a booming voice, and often I'd have to stop my client interview because I found that my partner's discussions in the next office were far more interesting. In any event, we stayed there until 1994 when we bought the land and constructed this office that you see here, and that's been my home ever since. It was constructed in this fashion to look like a Victorian house to fit into the Veteran Land Act neighborhood where it was found. We certainly wouldn't have been able to build it otherwise. And we have gone, I guess in my career, from having 1 lawyer in the office to 4. We have currently 1 partner, an associate, and 1 articling student who graduated last year from the U of A here. Through all this, I was taking courses through LISA, which is the Legal Education Society of Alberta, and the Canadian Bar Association. After my partner's death, I began to go to the Alberta Law Conferences, which are put on yearly by the Canadian Bar Association and are continuing legal education. They used to be known as the midwinter meetings. I tried at those meetings to try and attract young lawyers to join me in Grande Prairie. And it was at that point that I learned a very sad truth. And there appeared to be a magnetic attraction around the cities of Edmonton and Calgary, out of which no lawyer would venture. Whether it was a matter of ignorance or fear, or whether the larger firms were simply much better marketers than the smaller centers, I'm not sure. But I think there's a measure of truth in that it was both of those. When I was living in residence at the U of A, I had not even heard of Grande Prairie, having come from Calgary. But I had floor mates who told me all about it. One was a friend, and one is a friend to this date, and he works for Alberta Financial Services Corporation in Grande Prairie. My point today is to dispel the myths about small city and small center legal careers. I learned, for instance, that Grande Prairie is not the end of the road to nowhere, but the hub and regional center for most of northwestern Alberta and northeastern BC. It is the beginning of the road. So the lesson to be learned is don't be afraid or inhibited because it's away from one of the larger centers. When I arrived there were about 20,000 inhabitants, and it was booming. It was so busy the people were living in the parks, in their tents. And that was simply because there was no housing available. Not that they couldn't find it or afford it. It just didn't, there wasn't any. And there were about 35 to 40 lawyers in town, including the Crown. Despite some downturns, our population has now mushroomed to over 120,000 people. 60,000 is the official population. We can add to that a shadow population of probably another 20 to 25,000, and 30 to 60,000 more in the county within 30 kilometers of Grand Prairie. So you want to guess the number of lawyers that are there now? Yep, it's gone all the way up to maybe 50 or 55. So the population has increased anywhere from 400 to 600%, but the number of lawyers has increased by 25 to 35%. If those ratios aren't attractive to you, I don't know what would be attractive. As was mentioned earlier, there are 4 million people in this province now, 2 million or so in the bigger centers and 2 million in the rest of the province. 8,000 lawyers, 1,000 service 2 million, 7,000 service 2 million. Guess where the opportunities are. As you can well imagine, it remains extremely busy work-wise in Grand Prairie, and some areas of Alberta are even busier than us. Billions are being funneled into Fort McMurray. The new boom area is also showing up in Bonnyville, Cold Lake, and the eastern side of the province. As soon as we get our oil to tidal waters, watch out. So a couple of more comments about the benefits of the smaller centers from the aspect of work. It is busy, and you've heard earlier that divorce clients are sometimes 3 to 4 months waiting. Well, that's the case in our firm, and I believe in most of Grand Prairie as well. You could have a full-time practice in family law by setting up a shingle in Grand Prairie, and the next day you'd be busy. The remuneration for articling and junior lawyer positions are generally commensurate with most law firms in the bigger centers. There may be some law firms that will have a larger salary to start, but one has to balance that off against the fact that you'll likely attain partnership much sooner in the smaller centers. I made partner in about 2 years after I joined the firm, which was about 6 years at the bar, and my current partner was about 4 years into his practice. This is not atypical. There's also the consideration of the work-life balance. And I've been purposely trying to lead you that while there is work-life balance, the law side of things is a significant attraction. The work there is good, it's challenging, and it will meet every need that you could possibly have. In any event, I had a former partner who joined me from a major law firm in Calgary. His rationale in moving to Grand Prairie was that he never saw his wife and children. He had an hour trek to work and another hour to get back home at night. He was lucky if he got to go back home when it was rush hour traffic, but usually he was much later than that. The firm insisted on keeping him for massive hours of work and kept track of his hours and billings. This workload affected his marriage, and he was obviously under tremendous stress and burnout, the danger. In contrast, for the last 33 years, I've been able to get to work in 7 minutes. And I like to say that Grand Prairie has been booming, and when that happens, it's taken me 8 minutes. I can go home for lunch without a problem, although typically speaking, I take clients out for lunch. When my 3 children were growing up, you can well imagine in Calgary and Edmonton, you're going to have the problem of trying to get them to their daily activities, be it dance or athletics or hockey or whatever it is. We could do that in 5 to 10 minutes. In Calgary and Edmonton, you might have to be in 3 different places that are an hour apart. When I had to pick my daughters up at dance class, that was a minute away. And I often went there to watch. I also had the view, as did my previous partners, that we did not have a need for keeping track of the hours worked. And in fact, I can say that for the last 35 years, I have no idea how many hours I was working a week or a month or a year. I never kept track of it ever. I obviously felt that that was simply a pressure that I didn't need. But I did have the attitude that as a professional, you have the duty and obligation to work as hard as you can and get the job done. So that doesn't mean that I didn't spend lots of nights and weekends, particularly after my partner passed away. And before a trial date, it wasn't unusual to have me seen at the office at 3 or 4 in the morning. Another another perk that had a similar reduction in my stress levels involved the crowd of people that I met as soon as I got to Grand Prairie. As soon as I got there, I was introduced to a coffee club. My partner said, "Come with me, you're going to join me," and we joined a group that had probably a group of 4 to 15 people show up daily, and they're from every other walk of life. There were engineers,